Texans. Should he be your top priority? In 2 days until the NBA trade deadline, what team needs to make a move for Melo? We'll get into all of it. Against the Knicks trading Carmelo Anthony by Thursday's deadline, Melo has maintained that the team has not approached him about waiving his no-trade clause. And Berman sources say Melo would likely only consider accepting a trade to the Los Angeles Clippers or the Lakers. Melo telling the Undefeated that if he were to be traded, he wants to make sure that it benefits both teams. So a mutually beneficial situation here. Max, do the recent moves in the West force the Clippers to go out and get Melo?
No, the Clippers situation should make the Clippers go get Melo. And I've always thought the Clippers were a good fit for Melo, and I've always thought the Lakers were a terrible fit for him. Here's the problem with the Clippers, and this is why they need to make something happen. This is unequivocally, indisputably, and by far the greatest era, Lob City era, the greatest era in the history of Clippers basketball. There is no second place. Even the Elton Brand years on, forget about that. This is clearly the #1 era. They have the most talent, the best coach, etc., etc. And what do they have to show for it? They've still never, in their franchise history, been to a Western Conference Finals. Never even been to one. Never been out of the second round. So what do they have to show for this era? A handful more playoff wins than the Lakers, and this is the Lakers' worst era by far in their franchise history. So the Clippers really are facing a battle for the hearts and minds of LA sports fans, and this was their chance. The Lakers have never been lower. The Clippers have never been higher. Come really make inroads into those fans. And they're unable to do it because they can't win more than one playoff series in a given year. That's the pressure the Clippers face. No one thinks the Clippers are actually going to beat the Warriors. Very few think they're as good as the Spurs. The real pressure comes from within, comes from L.A. itself, comes from the competition with the Lakers. This is their window. It is closing. If it's not already closed, they need to do every single thing in their power to get past the second round of the playoffs. And that means, if that means getting Carmelo Anthony by hook or by crook, they need to do it.
Well, the reason why I somewhat disagree with you there, Max, is because clearly the Clippers need to do something, and clearly they need to react to the movement that's taking place in the league, simply because when you have others around the league who are trying to improve themselves, who recognize that there needs to be an upgrade, you're the Los Angeles Clippers. Standing pat gives the impression that you believe you're good enough when everybody and their grandmama knows that you're not. And so when you look at it from that perspective, based on all the other facts that you just threw out there, it elevates the level of urgency as it pertains to Doc Rivers and the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, not having Chris Paul for the plethora of games that he's missed due to his wrist injury, that gives you some kind of ingrained excuse. But the beauty of it is that he's expected to be back before the playoffs. He'll be well rested, to say the least. So as a result of that, who knows, you got to anticipate that you're going to get something great from Chris Paul. But what does he have to work with? DeAndre Jordan still struggles from the free throw line, even though we know he's formidable defensively as a shot blocker, and he'll dunk on anybody. Blake Griffin, I mean, the jury is still out on what he's going to be able to do for you, but even though we see him putting up respectable numbers, the point is he that dude that you can give the ball to when times get hard and say, damn it, figure out a way to take me to the promised land? Then the other question that needs to be asked is, who's a better pairing? Is it Chris Paul with Blake Griffin come playoff time, or is it Chris Paul with Carmelo Anthony? And that's a question that needs to be asked. And then last but not least, like you say, people know that nobody's going to beat the Warriors. Max, as a person that has spoken to Doc Rivers, as a person that has spoken to Chris Paul, as a person that has spoken to numerous players on this Clippers squad, I'm here to tell you, I have this as a quote from one member of their organization. We believe we're the only team who can beat the Warriors. They actually said that. Now, granted, it was before they lost by 46 to them, and that was when Chris Paul was injured. But I'm just saying to you, that's how bold they are in their proclamations, because they're that confident. So if you are that way, and there is something that you can tweak to elevate yourself into the championship picture, to put the Golden State Warriors on notice that you are coming, this would be the deal to make, in my estimation.
And that's the thing. When you're dealing with the Knicks, it's like you're dealing with the Kings. The dumbest, least functional organizations are the ones you can rob in a trade. So the Clippers are looking at the Knicks going, we should have to trade Blake Griffin to get Carmelo Anthony and something, but we ain't going to have to. We're going to be able to get Carmelo and not really give up anything. Because that's a stupid organization, the Knicks. And they're right. They probably will. And let me just furthermore say, another reason I like Carmelo to the Clippers is if Dan Gilbert continues to alienate LeBron James, nowadays with all the contracts, they have outs like every year, every other year, eventually LeBron will look for greener pastures. Where will he look? He's always stated that one of his preferences before he retires is to play with Carmelo Anthony and Chris Paul. That's been widely reported. They're all best friends. He's already done the Dwayne Wade thing with Chris Bosh. If Carmelo's in L.A. with the Clippers on a team that at least makes the Western Conference Finals, Carmelo and Chris Paul, that's a real lure for LeBron should it continue to or wind up souring in Cleveland, Stephen A. I like that move, Carmelo to L.A., both for the Clippers and Carmelo for a number of reasons, both immediate and long-term.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because if you already have CP3 and you've already traded for Carmelo Anthony, CP3, LeBron, and D-Wade are all free agents potentially this coming summer, and then you already have Melo in tow who would be under contract for you. So it would be incredibly, incredibly interesting if they were able to pull that off. It's hard to imagine that it will happen, but you just never know.
So, Max, you like that move, but do you like this prediction? Max knows a thing or two about boxing. Does Conor McGregor stand any chance in the ring against Floyd Mayweather? Freddie Roach has made his case. The guys will react to that after the break. And how about Isaiah Thomas causing a firestorm on Twitter? We'll tell you what it's all about and break it down later in the show.
I'm still looking out for these kids. Every family in this city matters to me. Every soul in the city matters to me. So everything's the same. I'm just not in the Kenny uniform anymore, which is okay because the love is still here. It's still gonna go on. Man. Thank you, everyone.
So, Boogie, a little choked up. We don't often see that side of him, and clearly he loved the city of Sacramento. So the Pelicans now, his new home, are currently 2.5 games out of the 8th and final spot. Max, I want to start with you here. What's the ceiling for New Orleans now that they've acquired him?
Look, this season, the ceiling is maybe you can win a playoff game because you're likely to be the 8th seed if you make it in. That means you're going to face the Warriors. You want to say you get to a Game 6, that's a major victory for this team and this franchise right now. But the ceiling long-term is quite high. They have a coach, let's not forget, in Alvin Gentry, who's from the Popovich tree, right? Not to mention D'Antoni, but who's looking pretty good right now. But what do you notice about Popovich and R.C. Buford and all these guys, those executives and those coaches, is that no matter what happens in the league, they seem to adapt. You hear Popovich talking about he's not even into the 3 ball, but that's part of the game. You're going to lose if you don't shoot him. So he adopted a lot of what D'Antoni, as I mentioned, another guy that Gentry's coached under, was doing and probably did it even better than D'Antoni. He takes bits and pieces empirically, meaning he sees what works in the real world and he uses them. And that's the coach that these guys have now, Boogie and Anthony Davis. So I know it's a guard-driven three-point shooting league, and now you have Twin Towers, though they can do a lot of things that guards have traditionally done, particularly Anthony Davis, but also Boogie in terms of shooting from outside. And you say, well, how are Twin Towers supposed to work when you have so many resources put there in a guard-driven spread offense type league? But in Gentry, again, you have a really good coach from a coaching tree that sees what works and does that. I think the sky's the limit for this franchise if they can hold on to their Twin Towers. But in terms of their short-term prospects, Stephen A., I say a playoff win this year would be a major accomplishment. A playoff win in one game would be a major accomplishment.
I agree with you on your latter point because that one win would be coming against the #1 seed, which happens to be the Golden State Warriors, who are the favorites to win it all. I agree with your latter point. Your former point would be quite different. And this is a hard subject for me to tackle. But it's first take. It's what we do, and I ain't running from anything. Alvin Gentry's a good man and a really, really damn good basketball mind. He deserves credit for that. I'm happy he got the opportunity to coach the New Orleans Pelicans. But I want to put for the record on here, he has to be watched. Alvin Gentry has coached in the NBA. He's been a head coach 14 seasons. Now, some of them are partial seasons because he took over on an interim basis and things of that nature. He's coached in Miami. He's coached in Detroit. He's coached in Phoenix, obviously, where he had his best season. I think it was like 2009, 2010, when he went 54 and 28 max, and Kobe drilled that jumper against him in the playoffs to pat him on the backside to let him know you're finished, it's over, the Lakers are moving on. We get that. But in his 14 years as a coach, Max, did you know that Alvin Gentry only has 2 winning seasons? 2 seasons with a winning record. That's it. In 14 years. Now, in his years in Phoenix, he's won, 52% of his games. Outside of that, Miami, 41%. Detroit, 50% of his games. Los Angeles Clippers, 40% of his games. New Orleans right now with a 53 and 86 record, 38% of his games. So when we talk about the ceiling, once again, we can't just talk about the players. We have to talk about what you have in place. Now, I don't believe he's had the talent, so he can't be judged by what he's done in New Orleans as of yet. And I do believe that he was doing a good enough job in Phoenix where it might have been, that he should not have lost the job even though he was 13 and 28 that year when they decided to let him go in 2013. But in the end, what cannot be escaped is the fact that we have to be careful about what we're saying when we're throwing out greatness, because the nuances of the game of basketball is something he may have mastery over, me, you, or anybody else. But we do have a right to judge his record. And overall, his record as a head coach is 388, 456. That's 46% of your games you've won. That is not greatness. And so now that Alvin Gentry has DeMarcus Cousins with Anthony Davis, let's be clear. He got to get it done. First things first, you got to get to the playoffs. You got to get that number 8 seed, okay? And then next year, after you get it, because I believe he will get them to the playoffs, he's on the clock.